You may have already watched some of the video content that we have provided that has discussed several different categories of additional child support arrangements that need to be made in addition to just the base child support. This includes daycare, health insurance, extracurricular expenses, logistical expenses, out-of-pocket medical expenses. And when you're managing all of those categories, it can become a nightmare sometimes in trying to communicate with your ex-spouse. One person paid the copay and the other person purchased a coat, and the other person paid for piano lessons, and the other person covered the cell phone bill. And each month they're trying to navigate who paid what and who's getting a credit for what. And that in and of itself can cause some problems. We strongly suggest that in addition to using our app, which will help to manage this, that the parties set up a fund for the for the other expenses that are going to be covered in their child support and the different financial needs for their kids. This fund can just be going to a credit union and opening up a joint savings account. Both parties are signers on the account. I know it sounds a little unorthodox. You just got divorced and divided an account, and your mediator told you to go open an account together and be joint on that account. The reason for this is quite simple. While we're trying to always improve the communication between mom and dad, one of the ways to improve that is to lessen the possibility for conflict, because conflict can be generated anytime there's ambiguity or we make assumptions. When you set up a fund, let's say that you agreed that you were going to have $100 a month allocated for your kids' extracurricular expenses and $50 a month allocated for for clothing. Food is covered by base child support. And that there was $75 allocated for logistical expenses, which are their cell phones and car insurance, and that there's $200 a month allocated for daycare. And let's say that all together, whatever those amounts equal to, let's say you have a $500 amount that the parents have agreed are going to be spent on the children for all those categories. And the parties have agreed that they're going to split those amounts 50-50. What we would encourage you to do is to open up this account. Every single month, mom and dad deposit $250 into that account. And they have an understanding that maybe the cell phone bill will be paid out of that account to AT&T. And maybe there will be a direct payment going to the piano instructor, and there may be some amount that's going to go directly to the car insurance provider and the daycare provider. And you're both going to have debit cards and checks, and there'll be those expenses that don't come out every single month. Maybe there's a library fine that needs to be paid for one of your kids, and you swipe the debit card for that. Ideally, the idea behind having that is that you don't need to nickel and dime each other for every expense. That you've agreed that $500 will go into that fund, and if you happen to be with the children or the party that's responsible for making that payment, you can do so without having to have a discussion over every piano lesson or every cell phone bill. Only if you exceed the $500 per month do the parties need to have a discussion. That happens frequently. Let's say you have a teenage daughter who's in drill team and that she wants to go to drill team camp, and it costs $2,000. Well, clearly that exceeds what we have allocated for extracurricular expenses. The parties would then need to have a discussion, and that discussion could be that they're going to need to additionally each put in $1,000 to make that fund if they both agree that the daughter's going to go to the drill team camp. Whether you use the money each month or not, you contribute your $250. If you don't use it, the money rolls to the next month. We encourage couples to be as generous on this fund as they can. If they think they're going to spend $500, agree to put $550 into the fund. The more that you can afford to put into that fund, the better, because one thing is for certain, as the children get older, they're going to get more expensive. Ideally, what you want to have is, if you have young children, by the time they're 15 years old, maybe you have $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in this fund, which will come in very handy for those times when they get in a car wreck and you need to pay a deductible, or they want to go on that football camp that's more than what you had expected. And ultimately, if they all graduate and you have $5,000 in that fund, you can split it and go on a cruise. We really try to encourage people. This is no different than an HSA in the medical world, where you're tracking that. You each get a statement mailed home to you, and that statement is going to show the charges, and you can go through that and determine, does that qualify for an extracurricular expense? Why do we have movie tickets on there? We agreed that was entertainment. Somebody needs to reimburse that fund for misuse of the fund. We have found that couples that will use this process to manage the extracurricular and the health insurance, the out-of-pocket medical and all those other categories that require reimbursements and tracking, if they'll use this process, it will save them a tremendous amount of problems and contention. It also makes it very simple to track, and you might want to consider stating that every year the parties are going to reevaluate what the needs are for the children. Every January, talk about what's coming up for that year and make adjustments to how much you're going to be putting into the fund. If you're like most parents, you're going to see it only go up. And I encourage people to say, look, if you can't agree how much you're going to increase it each year, agree that if there's a disagreement, it will go up by 10% no matter what, unless you have children graduating, and then the fund might go down. So as they get older and they drop off, obviously you don't have responsibility for them after they turn age 18. That would be a reason why the fund might go down. A mediator can guide you through crafting the appropriate language, ensuring that we're defining what extracurricular expenses are, logistical expenses, what is going to constitute out-of-pocket medical expenses. There are other videos that we have that you can listen to that will help you understand what those categories are. The purpose of this video is just to encourage you to set up a fund and use a separate fund for managing these